Boom! Threat identified! Sector 7. Storm shoots forward like a bullet. Frank Morrison, 82, doesn't even see what's coming. His veteran's cane slips. His naval cap flies off. Passengers scream. "Stop!" Collins yells. But Storm has already decided. Instinct against training. The dog stops, sits, protects. What do you mean he stopped? Collins doesn't understand. Storm never disobeyed. Never. But something about the old man's scent. Something familiar. Something sacred. Frank whispers liberty, hands trembling. Old pins gleaming, Storm recognizes. This man once commanded dogs. This man once saved lives. This man once lost a partner. The terminal explodes in confusion, cell phones recording, security running. But Storm doesn't move, protection position, as if saying, "I know you, you're safe now." 6 minutes later, the entire airport would be in tears. Nobody paid much attention to the elderly man walking slowly through Cedar Falls Regional Airport Terminal that cold Tuesday morning. His name was Frank Morrison, a retired Navy sergeant in his early 80s. He walked with a veteran's cane, its worn rubber tip clicking softly against the polished floor. The same faded Navy cap sat on his gray head every day, its old service pins barely visible after decades of wear. Most people assumed he was just another confused passenger slowing down the security line. They saw the tremor in his hands, the way he paused to squint at gate numbers, and they made their assumptions. Another old man lost in a world that had moved too fast for him to follow. But what they didn't know was that Frank Morrison had once served as a search and rescue dog specialist with the United States Navy. In 2005, after Hurricane Katrina devastated the Gulf Coast, he and his golden retriever Liberty had been deployed to New Orleans. Together, they'd searched through the wreckage of the Ninth Ward, located survivors trapped in flooded homes, and brought hope where there was only devastation. For 6 months, Frank and Liberty worked 18-hour days. They found Mrs. Rodriguez clutching her infant grandson in an attic. They pulled teenage brothers from a collapsed store. They located an elderly couple surviving on rainwater. 47 people in total owed their lives to the man and dog who never gave up. Until that gray October morning when a structural beam, weakened by flooding, finally gave way. Frank heard the crack, saw the shadow falling, lunged forward. But Liberty was faster, pushing him clear. The beam that should have crushed them both found only her. If you believe no veteran should ever be treated this way, type respect in the comments. This story gets deeper. Frank never owned another dog after that day. Some losses, he once told a stranger at a VA hospital, don't ever leave you. They just sit with you, quiet and permanent, like shadows that follow you everywhere you go. For 10 years, Frank had walked alone, his footsteps echoing in empty hallways where Liberty's paws once clicked beside him. On this cold Tuesday morning, Frank was at the airport to visit his granddaughter Sarah in Dallas, his first flight in 10 years. The terminal smelled of coffee and industrial cleaning solution. He gripped his cane firmly, feeling the familiar weight that had supported him through a decade of walking alone. The sound of baggage conveyor belts echoed through the vast space, mixing with gate announcements. His boarding pass crinkled in his free hand. Gate 15. He'd checked it 12 times already, but the numbers seemed to blur under harsh fluorescent lighting. His granddaughter had insisted he fly rather than drive 8 hours. "Grandpa, you're 82, she'd said with that mixture of love and exasperation only family can master. His mind drifted to Liberty, as it always did during stress. How she would sniff through New Orleans debris, her golden coat muddy, but her tail never stopping its hopeful wag. She had this special way of looking at him after each rescue, an expression that said, "Another life saved, partner." The pins on his cap had been given to him at a ceremony 6 months after Katrina. One small bronze pin for each life saved. Liberty had been beside him that day, wearing a medal around her neck, her coat brushed to golden perfection. Frank touched his cap gently, remembering how Liberty's medal would catch the light when she moved. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across polished floor. Frank could feel other passengers' stares, some impatient, others curious about the old man who seemed lost in memories. He didn't mind. At 82, after losing the most important partnership of his life, he'd earned the right to take his time. Gate 8, Gate 10, Gate 12. Each number brought him closer to 15, but deeper into a crowd that grew thicker by the minute. A business traveler pushed past him with barely concealed irritation, but Frank kept walking, kept counting gates, kept thinking about liberty. Something went wrong in that terminal. TSA agent Marcus Webb had been working airport security for 3 years. When he noticed the elderly man in the faded military cap walking slowly near the restricted area, pausing frequently and appearing disoriented, every training protocol flashed warning signals. Webb watched Frank through security monitors, noting how the old man would stop, touch his cap, look around with apparent confusion. The behavior seemed erratic, potentially dangerous. He whispered into his radio, "Control, this is Webb. Elderly male, possibly disoriented, acting erratically near Gate 12, requesting K-9 unit for verification." Sergeant Jake Collins received the call while patrolling with Storm near the food court. At 34, Collins had 8 years K-9 experience and had worked with Storm for 3 years. The German Shepherd had a perfect record. Never hesitating, never questioning commands, always focused and professional. "Sir, I need you to stop where you are," Collins called out firmly. Frank, with partial hearing loss from years around aircraft engines, didn't catch the words completely. He raised his hand to his ear, squinting to see who was speaking across the crowded terminal. Collins misread the motion entirely. In his training, someone approaching while ignoring verbal commands represented an escalating threat. Subject advancing despite verbal commands. "Storm! Position!" The crowd sensed the shift in energy. Conversations died mid-sentence. Children stopped running. Business travelers looked up from phones. The atmosphere changed from routine travel stress to something darker, more dangerous. Frank barely had time to register what was happening before he saw the German Shepherd bearing down on him with focused intensity. For a split second, time suspended. The terminal noise faded. There was only Frank, Storm, and the distance closing between them. "This man looks suspicious," Collins muttered into his radio. Erratic behavior near restricted area, failure to comply with verbal commands. Requesting full verification and backup. Frank felt his legs trembling, but not from fear. The sight of Storm, the familiar bulk and power of a working German Shepherd, transported him instantly back to New Orleans. Liberty had moved like that, with the same purposeful intensity when she caught a scent. "Remove the cap, sir," Agent Webb ordered, stepping forward with latex gloves. "We need to check for concealed items. Those fake medals probably bought online. Remove any outer garments and prepare for full pat-down." Frank clutched his navy cap tighter against his chest, not in defiance but in desperate preservation of something sacred. It was all he had left of liberty, of his service life. His hands shook as he whispered, "Please, it's all I have left of her." Webb laughed coldly. "Another crazy old man seeking attention with costume jewelry? Sir, these cheap decorations aren't fooling anyone." The pins caught harsh fluorescent light, small tarnished medals that spoke of lives saved, of purpose fulfilled. Each pin represented a face pulled from wreckage, a family reunited. The bronze star from his own service, the search and rescue commendation, the Katrina response medal. And in the center, barely visible but most precious, a small golden pin in the shape of a dog that Liberty had worn on her collar. "Compliance now!" Collins shouted, his patience exhausted. "Another fake veteran wasting our time." "Storm attack! Full engagement!" The command echoed through the terminal like thunder. Passengers stepped back instinctively, phones appearing to record what they assumed would be another routine takedown. Frank dropped to his knees, overwhelmed by the approaching attack dog and flooding memories. "Liberty," he whispered, tears streaming down his weathered face. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you." The words hung in the air like a prayer, and that's when something miraculous happened. Storm launched forward as trained, his powerful muscles responding to Collins' command with precision. But halfway through his approach, something shifted. His nose, trained to detect explosives and drugs, caught something else entirely, something that had nothing to do with threats. The scent of years working with dogs, of respectful command, of genuine partnership, the smell of someone who understood what it meant to be part of a team where trust was absolute. Storm's training warred with an instinct older than human commands. Frank closed his eyes, overwhelmed by flooding memories. In his mind, he was back in New Orleans, Liberty beside him, searching through debris for signs of life. He could almost feel her warm fur, hear her soft whine when she caught a human scent, see her tail wagging with pure joy. The terminal sounds faded away. There was only the memory of morning light filtering through broken windows as he and Liberty worked through a collapsed house, her nose leading them to a trapped family. The way she'd looked at him when they heard faint cries from beneath rubble, not with excitement of a hunt, but with satisfaction of purpose about to be fulfilled. He whispered her name again. Liberty. I miss you, girl. Every single day, I miss you. Storm stopped so abruptly his claws scraped against polished floor. His training instincts, attack, subdue, control, warred with something more primitive and true. This man wasn't a threat. This man was family in the way only those who'd shared the sacred bond between handler and working dog could understand. The German shepherd approached slowly, ignoring Collins' repeated commands. Instead of attacking, Storm gently pressed his nose against Frank's free hand. The touch was soft, questioning, seeking connection rather than establishing dominance. Frank's eyes flew open, and for a moment he saw not Storm but Liberty, not the sterile airport but muddy New Orleans streets where heroes wore fur and carried hope. The elderly man blinked, stunned. Then his eyes filled with tears that had been waiting 10 years to fall. Liberty, he whispered again, his voice breaking with a decade's worth of grief. Something about Storm, his posture, his gentle approach, was so heartbreakingly familiar it made Frank's chest tight with buried emotions. Collins tried again, voice rising with panic. Storm, return! Storm, disengage! But the dog ignored him completely, pressing closer to Frank, resting his head against the man's leg. 6 minutes later, everything changed. People around them watched in disbelief, phones appearing to document the impossible. A businessman lowered his cell phone and stared. A mother with 2 children stopped mid-conversation. Even airport staff found themselves witnessing something that had nothing to do with protocols. One bystander, a retired teacher named Margaret Sullivan, began filming the entire moment. A trained security dog defying orders to comfort an elderly man. Her fingers trembled as she held the phone steady, understanding she was capturing something rare. Then a voice cut through the crowd like a command. Stand down, Sergeant! Captain Robert Martinez, wearing his retired naval uniform for a VFW ceremony, pushed through the gathering crowd with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. He'd been watching the drama unfold from gate seating, first with casual interest, then with growing recognition as he processed what he was seeing. Captain Martinez, retired Navy, he announced firmly to Collins. That man you just ordered attacked is Frank Morrison. He paused, letting the name sink in. This man saved 47 lives during Hurricane Katrina with his K-9 partner. Collins looked confused. Sir, this is a security situation. No, Martinez interrupted, his voice carrying decades of command authority. This is Frank Morrison. I read about him in official reports, but more than that, his voice became thick with emotion. He saved my niece and nephew, Maria Rodriguez, age 34, and her son, Miguel, age 6. 9th Ward, New Orleans. The words hung in the air like a prayer answered after years of silence. Frank's eyes widened as the connection clicked. He remembered them, the young mother and son trapped for 3 days in their kitchen, surviving on rainwater while the city drowned around them. Miguel, Frank whispered, his hand still buried in Storm's fur. He had a dinosaur toy, a little plastic T-Rex that he wouldn't let go of, even when we were pulling him out. Martinez pulled out his phone, showing a recent photo. He still has it, he said, tears flowing freely. 20 years old now, studying engineering at LSU. He carries that dinosaur in his backpack every day. Says it reminds him that heroes are real. The terminal grew quieter as word spread mysteriously through crowds. A young man in Army uniform stepped forward. "Sir, thank you for your service." Then another voice. "My uncle was rescued by a K-9 team during Katrina." The testimonials began building like a chorus. Agent Webb, realizing his mistake, stepped forward. "Sir, I apologize. I didn't know—" "Those aren't fake medals," Martinez said firmly, pointing to Frank's cap. "Each pin represents a life saved. This man is a genuine American hero." Collins, still confused by Storm's behavior, finally understood. "Storm has never disobeyed before," he said to anyone who would listen. "Not once in 3 years. But he knew something we couldn't see." Margaret Sullivan, still filming, found herself narrating in whispers. The dog just knew. Somehow he knew this man was family. Martinez knelt beside Frank, his voice gentle. "Frank, I understand Storm is being retired from active service next month. The department has been looking for the right person to adopt him, someone who understands what these dogs are." He paused, glancing at Storm, who seemed to be listening. "Given the bond we've witnessed here today, would you consider taking him?" Frank looked down at Storm, who seemed to understand every word. The dog's tail wagged slowly, his eyes never leaving Frank's face. Frank didn't take long to answer Captain Martinez's question. His voice was steady despite his tears. "I think Liberty would want me to say yes. She always believed that love was meant to be shared, not hoarded." The crowd around them began to applaud. First one person, then another, until the entire terminal section was clapping. Passengers who had been recording now understood they'd witnessed something extraordinary. Agent Webb stepped forward, his face red with shame. "Mr. Morrison, I owe you a profound apology. I called your medals fake. I had no right. No excuse." His voice cracked. "Thank you for your service, sir. Thank you for everything you've done." Collins approached next, Storm still refusing to leave Frank's side. "Sir, I'm sorry for the misunderstanding. Storm, he's never acted like this before. It's like he recognized something in you that we couldn't see." Frank smiled, his hand gently stroking Storm's head. "Dogs see with their hearts first. Storm knew what I was before I remembered it myself." 3 weeks later, Cedar Falls Regional Airport looked different. There was a new plaque near the security area, polished bronze with engraved letters. "Veteran Recognition Zone, in honor of all who served," with special recognition for Frank Morrison and K-9 Liberty, whose service during Hurricane Katrina exemplified the best of human and canine partnership. More importantly, there was a new policy. Any veteran experiencing difficulty would be assisted with patience and respect, and all airport staff received additional training in recognizing service-related disabilities. Frank still wore his faded Navy cap every day, but now he walked with steadier steps and a purpose he hadn't felt in 10 years. Beside him trotted Storm, no longer an officer, but a companion and partner in the truest sense. A month later, Frank received a package with no return address. Inside was a photograph of a young man in an LSU engineering jacket, holding a plastic T-Rex and standing next to a bronze statue. The inscription read, "In memory of all the K-9 heroes of Hurricane Katrina." The back had a simple message. "Mr. Morrison, this is Miguel. I'm 20 now, studying to be an engineer so I can help rebuild places like the one you and Liberty saved me from. Thank you for giving me the chance to grow up. The T-Rex still goes everywhere with me. Miguel Rodriguez, P.S. My Aunt Margaret's video went viral. 15 million views and counting. Heroes never really retire, do they?" Frank stood up from his park bench, Storm immediately alert beside him. "Ready to go home, partner?" Storm wagged his tail, and together they walked into their second chance at the kind of partnership that makes life sacred. Thank you for typing respect. Subscribe for more stories of dignity. Support our mission through Buy Me a Coffee. Link in the first pinned comment. Until next time, honor never fades.